The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Okay, so as we are sitting here today, we are still in the shutdown mode here for the federal government. Annette, let's just kind of start with the simple question. How long do you think this will last? What's going to take to end it?
I don't know how long it's going to last. You know, with Congress changing this week and the make of Congress changing this week, I think you're going to have a stalemate. I don't see Nancy Pelosi giving in over the wall. I don't see Donald Trump giving in over the wall. And I think, you know, there's not going to be a lot of progress for a while. And the people who really pay the price are the federal workers who are doing the work and really, you know, working for free at this point. And so I think, you know, it's a really tough situation, and it's an unfortunate situation because we shouldn't be paying for a wall. And I'm glad that they're not giving in to this. But at the same time, we have a leader who is acting like a child and won't give a little to get a little either. So I don't know.
Chuck, what do you think? How long is it going to last? What's going to end it?
I don't know why you say we don't need a wall, because Senator Schumer has said that we need a wall. I mean, he's on record. They got him on video. You know, they've funded the wall before. They voted to fund the wall. So I think that, you know, I do agree with you. I mean, Trump can't give in on the wall and Pelosi can't give in on the wall because they dug their feet in, but somebody's going to have to give in on the wall one way or the other. And the thing with Washington, D.C. is until you reach a critical mass, when there is a real solid deadline of some sort, usually artificially inspired, a deal will be worked out which will satisfy absolutely no one, and then we'll go back to normal. And it's going to happen eventually. It's just who knows when at this point. Usually you would find a Republican who's willing to give in a lot quicker than I think Donald Trump is willing to give in. And it's difficult for him because this was his #1 campaign issue. It's really his only unfulfilled promise that he did during the campaign. He's got to come away with something. The Democrats are going to have to allow him to get something, or he's not going to give in.
Does it come down to then, when this ends, it's either Donald Trump is the winner or congressional Democrats are the winner?
I don't think there are winners in a shutdown, actually. I don't think there's a winner. I think what Chuck said is right. Nobody comes out a winner in this, and it's because nobody's going to be happy with the end result. And we should have never gotten to this point to begin with. I think it's irresponsible that we've allowed our government to be shut down. And again, the workers and our national parks and all of these other services that we rely on to keep us safe, those are the things that are being hurt right now. And so for me, I don't think there are winners in a shutdown. I do think we have champions in Washington, D.C., like Dina Titus and others, who are back there fighting for Nevadans and are lifting our voices up. But at the end of the day, I don't know that we have winners and losers when it comes down to a shutdown.
I think it respond to that, but also I just want to get your thoughts on the notion then of maybe a partial reopening. Let's say you leave the issue of Homeland Security behind and funding for that, but you get the rest of the government open. Some sort of a compromise like that. Can you see anything in there?
And that's the thing I think a lot of people are missing right now, Patrick, is that it's not a government shutdown. It is a partial government shutdown right now. And the only ones who aren't working are what are being deemed non-essential, right? Which from a conservative standpoint, the question obviously arises, well, if they're non-essential, then why do we have them in the first place? But, you know, it's not a matter of safety because they're considered essential employees. So you still have the TSA working, Homeland Security is still working. It's the non-essential ones. And so I think there's probably a possibility that you could open up some other parts of the government that right now are shut down and leave the Homeland Security question, which is, you know, that's the most important aspect that is, you know, partially shut down right now.
But the problem is those workers who are working, like TSA and those folks, are not being paid. So those workers are working for free right now. And that is the problem with this shutdown, is you have workers showing up for work every day and not being paid because they are essential staff. We have to have TSA. We have to have those folks. And so, you know, it does cause problems because people can't pay their mortgages. They can't pay. I was reading an article about it this morning in Reno. The TSA agents, they're having to have a special program for them to find childcare and other things to pay their mortgages because they don't have money coming in the door right now. And that's unacceptable. We need to be paying employees their fair share.
Of course, that's part of the problem too, that extends the partial government shutdown is the fact that everyone knows that those employees will eventually be made whole.
Right.
They're going to get the money back. So, you know, if they're borrowing money right now to pay the mortgage, they know they're going to get their paychecks back and are going to be able to pay off those loans. So that exasperates the problem. If they weren't going to get that money back eventually, there'd be a heck of a lot more pressure on both sides of this issue to resolve the issue quickly.
I saw an interesting, just one of those surveys that comes through, we see in our reporter emails. It was the states most impacted by the shutdown. Though not a state, D.C., of course, most impacted, federal services, or duplicative of city services, all of that. But I think Arizona was number 10. Nevada wasn't in the mix, but Annette, from what you've seen here in Nevada, what impacts do you feel we are seeing here?
From the research that I did, it's over 3,000 employees right now in Nevada, north and south, that are not being paid currently. So those are workers that are at Lake Tahoe, so the Coast Guard at Lake Tahoe. They'll do search and rescue missions, but they're not doing anything else. There's no other monitoring going on at Lake Tahoe. Mount Charleston, you see the bags and the trash kind of piling up. There's other workers that are being impacted as well. So it's a little over 3,000 is the estimate right now. So, but that's still a lot of people that are not getting paid and don't know when their next paycheck is coming because our government can't figure it out. And to me, that's unacceptable. And, you know, you're seeing damage happening, like I said, at national parks and all over the country. You know, there's stories about in Yellowstone, you know, the human waste piling up on the sides of the road. That's not acceptable. And so we need to figure this out quickly, and we need to move forward.
The problem is, especially in Nevada, you said 3,000 workers out of a population of 3 million. So it really is not impacting the average Nevadan who's going, I mean, their life is completely unaffected. When they used to close down the parks completely, there was an effect on people who wanted to go to the parks. Now, you just don't have to pay the fee to get into the park. People generally say, oh, well, actually, that's a good thing. I can go to Red Rock and now I can go in and hike and bike and enjoy it, and I don't have to pay the fee to get in there. So I don't think it's having the negative impact on the vast majority of people in Nevada. You're absolutely right, though. It's affecting the people in D.C. That's where the workers are. That's where the media is. That's why they're making a much bigger deal out of this, I think, than the average American is being affected.
Let's talk about state politics now. Governor Sisolak set to take office. He'll be sworn in on Monday. State of the State speech 9 days later. What do you expect to hear in the speech? What are you wanting to hear in the speech? I
think education has to be one of the #1 focuses, and I think based on my meetings with the governor, that is going to be one of his top priorities, and it has to be. I think you have to restructure the funding formula in Nevada. It's decades old, and we shouldn't be using the same funding formula we used when I went to school, when my mom went to school here. So we need to look at that and have a serious conversation about, you know, Southern Nevada getting our fair share of what we put into the economy here for our education. I think you're going to see him talk a lot about jobs in the economy. I think you'll see him talk a lot about renewable energy, a lot about, you know, economic issues around paid sick leave and things like that. And those are things that excite me because I want to see that out of the governor. And I think you will see those things come from Governor Sisolak's mouth. I do also think, though, that, you know, all of us have to be cautiously optimistic. I don't think you're just going to get everything progressive right out of the gate. I think this will be a kind of a long haul type process where, you know, slowly but surely we're starting to see change on these issues. And I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And I do think that Governor Sisolak is more moderate. And so you're not going to see some of the big sweeping policy changes that you would normally see under other governors.
Anything that you would want add to that? Anything that you would want to hear the governor say you don't think he will say?
I think, and that's absolutely correct on this, I think that basically the State of the State speech, you could almost transpose Governor Sandoval's face over his body, and you're going to hear pretty much the same thing. It's going to be very, very similar, because I think Steve Sisolak is more of a moderate Democrat. Governor Sandoval was definitely a more moderate Republican governor, and so I think you're probably going to see general outline themes, you know, one Nevada and rah, 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 and it's going to be all positive and uplifting. And then the real work will come once the legislative session comes in. And we were talking about this before we aired, Patrick. I think Governor Sisolak's biggest challenge is going to be to moderate the Democrats in the legislature from going too far and creating issues that Republicans can use in 2020. They're going to be very emboldened by the fact that they've got a supermajority in the Assembly and a de facto supermajority in the Senate. I mean, they only need one Republican to come over on any given bill, and if the bill's not absolutely, California-like, they'll get more than one Republican to come over. So I think that's, the whole game is really in the Democrats' hands to make sure, for the governor, to make sure that the Democrats don't overreach so that they maintain their majority going into 2020 election cycle and have the majority in both the Senate and the Assembly again in 2021 when redistricting comes up. That's got to be key for him.
And I think that's at the top of the Democrats' minds. From the meetings that I've been having and from the things that I'm hearing, look, I'm pretty liberal, but I also understand, really? I'm also a pragmatist, and I understand how politics works. And I believe we have to take a systematic approach about this. And you're right, not just completely say, oh, let's just do everything. That's not real, and that's not how progress happens. And so I think we're going to take a systematic approach about progressive issues and say, okay, what can we get done this session? What can we get done, in 2021? Hopefully, with a positive outcome for redistricting, and be very strategic about how we move this stuff forward.
How many vetoes then do you see coming back to be overridden that Governor Sandoval had in 2017? Would you see a lot of them coming back then, or do you see Governor Sisolak then having to have maybe the unpopular position within the party of saying no?
I mean, they can, from what I've read, and I don't know, and that's much more tuned into what their plans are. For some reason, they don't consult me on the left. I don't know why.
Who knows?
I've not heard that they intend to try to override a bunch of Governor Sandoval's vetoes. I don't know that that's high on their list. They've got the supermajority. They can pass whatever legislation they want to pass.
New versions, for example, new versions of some of those. Maybe.
Exactly, and there may be. Let me go back to that because I think she's touched on it. Education should be the top priority. I agree with that. I agree with that regardless of who's in charge of the legislature. The question is, what does that mean? Right. I think that we went through the 2015 session. We passed the largest tax increase in state history, ostensibly for education, and yet we're still at the bottom of the pack. All that extra money didn't fix the problem. Now, if Democrats come back and say, well, we still didn't get enough, we still need more, my question is, okay, just tell us how much more. What is the amount that we have to have that's going to fix all the problems? And if they don't, then what? And I don't know that we're going to actually hear that, though, in the governor's State of the State speech.
Well, and to be fair, the first budget that Governor Sisolak is inheriting essentially has been written for the last 18 months or so by former Governor Sandoval's staff.
Yeah, and he's made some changes to it, and there's been some, tweaks to it. And I think you see Governor Sisolak chart his own course now. I think, it isn't all that different from Governor Sandoval, but it will be different, and he will make his mark. And I think we should be excited about that. I do think, though, when we talk about education, we have to have a serious conversation about where is the money going and how are we spending that money. And it's a conversation we've needed to have for decades in this state. And so how do we fix education, and how do we better use the money that we already have? And I think those are going to be the funding formula is going to be probably the hottest topic this session, I hope.
And I think, to be fair, didn't we see this more of a bipartisan issue coming out of 17 when you talk about restructuring and all of that, where you saw a bipartisan effort really from state lawmakers aiding in the friction against Clark County School District employees and trustees, right? We saw Roberson leading the committee out of 2015, and you saw some of the other folks calling for the audits and going for all of that, the forensic audits, to see where this money is going that they've allocated to the schools. I think there is a bipartisan appetite to try to fix the problem. It's just, like you said, it's going to be the details, the devil's in the details.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest disappointment that conservatives are looking at going into the 2019 session with regards to education is what they're going to do with education savings accounts, the school vouchers. It was probably the greatest failure of the Sandoval administration to have not funded that program. Once it was upheld by the Supreme Court, he had two opportunities to fund it once it was declared constitutional, and he blew both of them. He just blew both of them off. And now with the Democrats in control of both the governor's office and the legislature, it's very possible, maybe even likely, that they're going to get rid rid of that completely. And that, I think, is unfortunate, because that is an opportunity for parents who wish to choose that option. They're paying their taxes. The public money should go for public education, not necessarily public schools. Now, if you can find a way to keep all the existing money, whatever you want to pay for the public school system, fine. It's not a whole lot of money to come up with $30 million in this huge budget to give parents who wish to exercise an option to send their kid to a private school, to allow them to do so. I think that's going to be a very unfortunate thing if that program is killed in 2019.
I think that all goes back to that marijuana money discussion when you were talking about how would that fit in at the end of the 17 session. Ended up being rainy day fund money.
Yeah, it did, because Michael Roberson messed everything up at the end, threw a temper tantrum, and then didn't allow that money to go into the into the DSA. So now what we have is we've got to fix that funding, make sure it goes into the DSA where it should have been to begin with. And I don't think they fund vouchers. I do not see them funding vouchers. I know my organization will be very outspoken about not funding vouchers, because I don't believe that public tax dollars should be going to private schools, because that's what they are. And so at the end of the day, I hope that program doesn't get funded, and I hope it actually gets removed completely.
And that's just maybe it's a philosophical difference. Public funds should go to public education. That does not necessarily mean public schools are the only opportunity, or should be the only option. It really should be up to the parents to decide where they're. Look, if you trust a mother and a father to decide which doctor your child goes to, why can't you trust the parents to decide which teacher teaches their children? And that's just a fundamental difference that Annette and I have on that issue.
Yeah, I think we're not going to solve that. That would be the Great Peace Summit coming out of here today. But we will end it on that. I thank you both for coming in, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Great. Happy New Year to you.